I think a good article has a great hook.
Would you say that you still have that fear of
Yes,
public landing? Okay.
yes.
Definitely like personal truths that I hold but haven't spoken on get spoken on in the story for sure.
My advice is to never do it.
A lot of the norms just flew out the window. People were kind of behaving badly, I would say, myself included.
I've never thought that I was cut out for something like this, and that might just be a pressure that I put on myself, but I'm always wondering if my work will ever be good enough
Maybe if my book actually gets published, we can have a book club for that.
because Catholics like believe in the second coming, and I was terrified of the second coming. Imagine there's no money involved or anything like that. Where are you in 6 months? You not to make this about religion again?
All right, hello everyone. We are washed up and we are here to interview one another. I'm Colin, this is Abby, and we thought it would be a fun exercise to kind of showcase our interviewing skills, which is something that we talk about a lot on our show, Washed Up, and that this would be a nice little introduction to our channel.
Yeah, we decided to do this little segment because we want to pin this video to the top. And for future listeners and video watchers, podcast fans of Washed Up, we want to make sure that you get to know us personally as well.
Yeah, so I think I'm going to be starting off. We're going to trade off, but I'm going to be interviewing Abby first. So, yeah, without further ado, I think we can get started. My first question for you. You've mentioned that you come from a very close and supportive, loving family, that you're very close with your siblings. And I'm also curious, what traditions or practices does your family like to keep up and maintain that you think facilitates that closeness?
Hmm. I think that my parents in general have always raised us to be like, oh, the only people you have is each other. And I've seen that reflected in my parents' relationship with their siblings. They're both the oldest siblings, so I'm being raised as the oldest sibling by two oldest siblings, which I feel like could be analyzed as well. But tradition-wise and um I guess like activity wise, I think with my extended family, we always went to the movies. Like the movie, we have $5 movies in Vegas, which I always loved, and every time we could, we would go. And when I would come home from college, like I would always do that too. I was always the one to plan with all my cousins because they're not the best planners, but I think I am. With my family itself, um, dinners, I'd say, and just, I don't know, me and my siblings have always been pretty close. I like to play with my little brother a lot growing up. He's only 3 years younger than me. But yeah.
Nice. And do you guys tend to spend like holidays together or live in the cl same close proximity in Vegas pretty much?
Growing up, no, in terms of proximity wise. So we would actually, which is funny because I think growing up we saw them, like my extended family, much more often. So like literally once a week, my parents would drive 45 minutes to go to this family party once a week. And back then they were younger, so like oftentimes they would even sleep over and like we would have this huge sleepover in one of my auntie and uncle's house. So that was always fun. And holidays are always spent with the family for sure. Like I can't even imagine spending it with friends or otherwise. I think that would make me really sad. Even my birthday, because it's December 19th, so it's really close to Christmas. So I think that I feel lucky in that way.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, so my next question is also taken back to childhood a little bit. I know on the show we bring up a lot. We both come from Catholic families, and you were brought up attending Catholic school. So I was curious. Well, you've also talked a lot on Washed Up about how you think it's important for people to have faith, even if they're not necessarily religious. So I wanted to ask, what's your favorite Bible story, and which Bible story confuses you the most?
I do have one that confuses me the most. It's the one where um I'm like blanking on names right now, but the guy's watching her bathe. Do you know which one I'm talking about?
Samson
Maybe.
and Delilah.
Yes.
And
Okay.
he cut, yeah.
Okay. That one actually, when we were in middle school, I remember we turned the Hey There Delilah song into the song about into the story about Samson and Delilah, and that story has always like I think is very strange. My favorite Bible story might just be because of nostalgia, but I don't know if you ever had this because you were raised Catholic too, but we had those like mini child Bibles. And the one that I would make my mom read to me like over and over and over again was when Moses was taken out of the river.
Hmm. Yeah, those are definitely both interesting. So what part of the Samson Delilah was confusing? Was it like the way that she is like accused of seducing him and that he loses his power, or like that his hair is his power? Like there's a couple of things going on there.
I think a lot of it, I think, I don't know if you've had a similar experience, but when I was younger, I quite literally took a lot of it very literally. Um, Sometimes I think to myself, maybe a lot of anxiety around uncertainty comes from religion and from these stories because I was always very scared of like God coming down and returning because Catholics like believe in the second coming and I was terrified of the second coming, like so scared. And I had so much anxiety about that. Like I'd be sitting in church because I used to go to church 3 times a week, K through 5, and then I went that's not including Sundays with my family. And then twice a week in middle school, also not including Sundays with my family. And I would genuinely pray and be like, please not yet. Like, I'm so scared. Which is so funny because I actually just heard this on a different podcast that I listened to of one of these influencers talking about the same fear. So I kind of felt vindicated in that fear.
Would you say that you still have that fear of the
Yes.
world ending? Okay.
Yes.
Very fair, very fair. We might come back to that, circle back at another point. But okay, so another question I had, you have a tattoo of an apple,
Right.
and you also have a Finsta account of you posting pictures of apples around various places. So what does the apple represent or mean to you?
This is so funny because the Apple account was created after the Apple tattoo. I got the Apple tattoo in Madrid with our mutual friend, and she had visited me when I was studying abroad there, and she was like, Abby, we're both here. We need to get a tattoo together. And I've booked us appointments. She knew this was okay with me because all my tattoos have been very much like spontaneous. And before going to this tattoo shop, us and our other like 4 or 5 friends, we were going to a museum there, El Prado, and we were walking around, and I was like, okay, this is how I'm going to decide what tattoo to get. And I just kept being drawn back to the art pieces that had to do with actually Adam and Eve, not to make this about religion again. And I decided when I walked into the tattoo shop to get an apple because I saw this design there. And I decided to get it. It was this was my most spontaneous one. And the Apple account is a bit that I decided to make this year because I don't, miserable is a very strong word, but I wasn't having the best time and I wanted to find the good in the time that I was having. So I basically forced myself to say a positive thing every single day in the caption about my life. And the Apple was the only thing that was consistent besides my 9 to 5 job and family.
Okay. Wait, so there's a lot to pull apart there because I feel like that's such a great answer because it touches on so many different things about you. Like it has the travel aspect, Madrid especially, El Prado, doing it with your friends, being spontaneous with the religious tie-in also. So it's very interesting to me that the apple is sort of like the intersection of all of those for you. Makes a lot of sense. Anything else to add on to that?
No, I try to eat an apple a day. I haven't updated my Instagram account in a while because my life has been very hectic right now. So I guess that's kind of ironic that the time that I was doing it a lot, it was so consistent and like more monotonous versus now it's kind of life feels very out of control and I haven't been keeping up with my apple.
So maybe we have to bring the Apple account back.
Yeah, I'm trying.
Okay, let's see what else. Okay, so off camera, we talk a lot about situationships and Gen Z's approach to dating. And without naming names, what does your past situationships teach you, or what advice would you offer to someone who finds themselves stuck in a situationship?
My advice is to never do it. I I think it's interesting meeting people in my adulthood outside of college now. Especially people who are in relationships. Honestly, I'm not meeting many people in relationships because I think that I'm having more in common with people who aren't, in like that people in relationships who also have communities might not be as inclined to like put themselves out there and be like, oh, we should like get dinner, we should do this because I guess I don't want to say tied down because it always has a negative connotation. They just have other priorities, which makes so much sense.
Mhm.
But when I do meet people, it's funny to like rehash the past, I guess, because these people don't know me in college or high school or before anything, so I have to be like, oh yeah, I've actually never had a relationship. And a mutual friend of ours would actually be like, Abby, no, yes, you have. You just like didn't label anything.
I would agree with this.
And because I was wrecked, like I was so destroyed by some things that have happened to me. And I think that my advice to you would be the same that our mutual friend would give me is that just because something doesn't have a label doesn't make your pain any less or doesn't make your experience any less meaningful than somebody who may have had an official label, I
Yeah,
guess.
yeah. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. That's really good advice. Moving on quickly to next one. You have an interest in constitutional law and free speech. You said that if you were to become a lawyer, you would want to be focused on like one of those two, I think. Have you ever thought about going to law school? And if so, what's kind of your biggest reservation about that? And then same question for journalism too.
I think now more than ever, I've considered law school, which is so interesting. And by considered, I mean like on a scale of 1 to 10, it's like a 4.5. So it's like not like I'm about to like apply or anything, but it's because my job right now, I'm visiting a lot of law firms with students who are actually pre-law. And so I'm getting to know all these lawyers and like what their life is like and things like that. And some of them convinced me not to based on just the work life balance. But some of them are like, oh yeah, like you can do it, stuff like that. Like you can decide what kind of law you want to practice. And the part that makes me not want to pursue it, I think, is that there's a very big time commitment to it, as well as there's just like I wouldn't want to put myself in more debt for something that I wouldn't even be using when I could probably tackle the issues that I care about through different forms of advocacy other than being within law.
Mhm. Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. And how about when it comes to journalism? If you were, I know you've been thinking a bit about like professional journalism, and so do you have any reservations about it? Are you thinking about it actively now?
Oh yeah, like I have so many reservations about journalism, and I always think about like specifically my 19-year-old self who was I think the hungriest version of myself. Honestly, besides right now, I feel like I'm getting that back in terms of remembering who I am and like what I want to do outside of, you know, living and loving. Um, but I think my reservations with it are honestly have to do with self-doubt, I think. You and I always say something along the lines of, "Oh, I feel like a journalist," or like this might be some real journalism here. And it's kind of a joke, but it's for me not. Um, I have I've never thought that I was cut out for something like this. And that might just be a pressure that I put on myself, but I'm always wondering if my work will ever be good enough, and it's just scary to let people read your stuff.
Yeah, and I think like for both of us, Washed Up is a great outlet for that because we can kind of like play on the edges of it and like, dip into like actual real reporting and journalism, but then also do stuff like this that's more kind of like entertainment and for fun and practice, and it doesn't have to feel like it's like someone's breathing down your neck. Like you have to, like, where's this report? Where's this article? It's, like that kind of thing. So it's a good middle ground, but I could very much see you like taking that middle ground and stepping into like a full journalistic role at some point. But
Yeah, I think that I'm definitely, when it comes to journalism, like all or nothing. I remember our advisor in college, she basically plucked me out of arts and culture and she was like, Abby, why are you in this stupid shit? Like in much or less words. She was a very intense lady and she was like, if you want your words to matter, then go into news because that's the only place that it'll actually make an impact, which I don't think I tr fully agree with. But at the time, like 19-year-old me was like, oh my God, you're so right. And I think that I've held on to like that little like tidbit of, I guess, advice from her that still lives rent free in my mind.
so I actually wanted to bring her up. She was in my list of questions right here. Um, So as you said, we had the same advisor in college. She always had a lot of sayings and advice, and that was some great advice that you mentioned just now
Oh,
about.
great.
Well,
It's like
so
on the precipice of great.
you've told me in the past, what's some great advice that she gave to you, or things that stick with you that you remember?
I think the the takeaway I took from her the most was just how little F's she gave about what people thought of her. I truly, truly wish that I could be like that because I think I present confidently sometimes, but I'm very sensitive. And she just was unapologetically so herself. And just she just knew how even if people disagreed with her, anything like that, she was just so open to saying whatever she wanted without fear of retaliation. And that might just be because of her age, maybe, or because she had to be in that space as a woman in the 80s or something like that. But she was just a powerhouse in that way. And I still admire her for that.
Do you have a favorite saying of hers?
If it smells like shit, it probably is.
That's a good
I
one.
actually think about that all the time in throughout investigative work that we used to do a lot.
Yeah, that and like follow the money is another good one that I feel like never fails us. Okay, so we'll return to the Vista in a little bit, our old newspaper, but I wanted to make sure we touched on this one. So you've mentioned in the past, correct me if I'm wrong, your great grandparents were Japanese American and they were in an internment camp in World War II. Is that correct?
My great grandma she's still alive, half Japanese. And yes, she had some experiences when she was very young about her when she was in Hawaii and she's like been through a lot and I don't actually have the full story yet. But if you let me hear your full question.
Yeah, well, I was just wondering, just from knowing her and seeing her experiences a little bit, do you think that that's informed your own personal worldview at all, or even just tying it back to your Asian American identity? Has that informed your worldview when it comes to like civil liberties, the importance of tolerance and openness, and how you view other cultures?
Yeah, totally. I think it didn't inform me at all until not at all. I don't think I realized how much my Asian American identity meant to me until going to college. I was raised in a very predominantly white community, and I didn't think that that affected me until I had friends that were basically all Filipino in college for like a little bit, like that whole first semester of college, I think like changed and rewired my brain in a way that no other time in my life has been, especially because we were isolated, like genuinely because of COVID. And like going back to my family, like, yeah, like stories like that I haven't even heard yet. Like my parents have always told me like, oh, you need to ask her about this and stuff like that. And she's in a senior citizen home and she also has like maybe just dementia. I'm not sure. But she's going through a lot in that regard. And I definitely have been meaning to like fully talk to her and interview her about that too. But yes, I do think that my experience in my identity has shifted so much within the past 4.5, 5 years. Like I would look back at maybe interactions that happened when I was younger, and I thought to myself, wait, like that's so weird as an adult, which I didn't think was weird when I was younger. Maybe I just felt a little weird, but not to the point that I think I'm able to analyze or grasp at 23.
That makes sense. And so I know you also recently had a tattoo, another tattoo that you got.
Yes, yes.
Wanna
Um,
fill in our audience on
It
that?
is the Filipino sun from the Philippines flag. And I always knew that this is actually the one out of the two tattoos that I have planned. The other one I haven't gotten yet, but I knew that I always wanted this and I wanted it done by a Filipino tattoo artist. And when my coworker recommended this tattoo artist in DC, who she's Filipino, I was like, I know exactly what I'm gonna get because I knew it would be done right.
Awesome. Okay. So do you have plans to ever go to the Philippines? Have you ever been there before?
I've never been to Asia yet, but I really do want the Philippines to be like the first place that I go in Asia. My dad and I have always talked about how we want to like try to go to the areas that our family lineage, I guess, is traced back to. I think that would be really cool. And I think that'd be really cool to experience something like that as somebody who I guess can trace my racial identity and ethnicity. Like I know some people have like so much mixed going on that they don't really know what their like I guess mo quote motherland would be. And I never realized how much I appreciated that side of myself too until I talked to other people about that.
Gotcha. Okay. So we're coming down on time just a little bit, but I have one more kind of long question and then a lightning round. So
Okay.
here's the last long one. If you were going to write yourself as a fictional character, um, first of all, what name would you pick? But more importantly, what would be your fatal flaw as a fictional character?
Oh my God. Name? I'm not sure. I have this like really weird things where I hate B's and G's, and that's why I don't like the name Abigail, and why the name Abby I don't really like either. And just saying it out loud makes me actually cringe. I wrote my college essay about how much I hate my name, and how much I hate B's and G's. Um, and so it's hard to say. I really like names with like the k sound. Um, yeah, I couldn't tell you a name right now off the top of my mind. And what was the second half? It was Fatal
Was
Flaw,
yeah,
right?
fatal
Oh
flaw.
my gosh, this is so Percy Jackson. I feel like we've had this exact conversation, like at least in the newsroom, at least around the time that I was writing that Percy Jackson story. I think my fatal flaw is probably my loyalty in terms in the I'm viewing it from the Percy Jackson world because that is how I look at a lot of things, which is also something that has shaped me a lot. Um, I would say I am intensely diehard loyal, and that sometimes can be a good thing, but other times it could be a bad thing. I think journalistically it's a bad thing because you have to be like unbiased for the most part and you have to, want to get both sides, stuff like that. But like if it's somebody I love and I am too intensely loyal to it, like there's no way I would ever be able to say anything bad or paint anyone in a light that's bad outside of into the outside world, anyone in my circle. And then also like I think it could be a bad thing personal wise because I'll just take that person's word and run with it. And I think that none of my people could do anything wrong ever.
Okay, that's great. And so just to wrap it up here with our lightning round, going just touching in journalism a little bit. So my intention here is like couple word answers, just very brief. What was your best interview and your worst interview that you've had?
Worst interview I've ever had is probably one of the ones with the USD police chief. I remember it's because it was always monitored. So like any interview I've had that has been monitored, no. Best interview I ever had was with um I'm blanking on her name right now. I want to say it was Leanne, but I feel like it's something else. Kim is her last name. And it was for a story that I wrote about the Asian American arts festival in San Diego, and I had this recording of her. I've since lost my phone, or I got my phone stolen in Barcelona, so it's gone. But it was just it literally made me cry. I used to re-listen to it sophomore year because she just had the best freaking advice in the entire world and this light to her as an older woman that I just was like, wow, like I can't wait to live, like be past my 20s and like be in this environment where she's viewing it and being like, "Oh, I can create, I could do this, I could do that." She was just
Mm,
wonderful advice. Best interview ever.
okay, that's great. How about what makes a good article?
I think a good article has a great hook. I think that the title really, 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 really matters. I think that the first line, like literally the first three words is what makes or breaks an article because people, especially nowadays, has such a small attention span. And also, what makes a good article, in my opinion, is something that you as a journalist, you as a writer, and I guess this could apply to podcasting too, can apply something to that story that no one else in the world can.
Okay, yeah, I like that. And then kind of similar, what makes a good reporter?
A good reporter has good intuition and can follow it anywhere.
Okay, great. Um, how about favorite story that we published while we were on the exec team and least favorite?
My favorite story on the exec team is probably the Carl. Like, I won't lie. Like, that was just so cool to be publishing a story that one of the bigger outlets for San Diego, like, ended up catching that story after that. That was a time that I felt like a real journalist. And our news editor at the time, she was so passionate about the story and she kept working on it and working on it even when we would keep telling her to write more and like do more and I thought that stood and said something about her too. But that was a very cool article that we got to publish. Um Least favorite probably like any story that repeatedly had to do with Kanye. Like, we had an issue where everyone was wanting to talk about Kanye all the time, and I remember one time just being like, guys, no more Kanye stories.
Yeah, that was true. That happened over like the couple of years where he was really active, so
Yeah.
it got a little annoying. But okay, those are all my lightning. Oh, just kidding. One more lightning round.
Okay, I'm scared.
Your biggest fear besides the end of the world, Armageddon,
Okay.
like an existential fear, or it could be a superficial one too.
I'm deeply, deeply terrified of losing all my memory at all times.
Hmm.
I think that's why I write down a lot of things. Alzheimer's and like memory loss issues seem to run on sides of my family, so I'm very deeply afraid of that.
Huh. Yeah. Well,
You're like, okay, we're done.
well, I'm glad that we've been able to discuss and get this all out here because you can always rewatch this.
Okay. And that's why I also like this podcast and also why I like to journal and write things down about people and stuff like that because one day I just am terrified I'm going to forget. Okay, it's time for Colin's turn. So, Colin, you're on the hot seat. I just wanted to start it off simply and ask you a little bit about journalism.
Yeah.
Why do you think that you are drawn to journalism?
For me, it really comes down to the truth. I think I really value clarity and the truth. And so, sort of in all things that I do, I'm trying to elucidate and bring new light to situations where there's more ambiguity or lack of clarity. That sort of comes from a deeply personal place because had various experiences growing up where I felt like there was not a lot of clarity, and certain other people were sort of like benefiting from that. And I know how it feels to be on the receiving end of like manipulation, gaslighting, lies, deception, etc. So I kind of made it like a life's mission of mine to provide like clarity for people over things where maybe they don't understand like what's happening, or um yeah, just the truth. So hopefully I'm able to do that in a very small way by talking about the news. I mean, the news is kind of a little bit more superficial than that, but I like journalism because it has many layers to it. You can get very deep into the weeds on like a specific story that can provide people with kind of like a catharsis of sorts when they fully see the full picture.
Yeah, I really like what you said about the truth, and I think that we always talk about that within Washed Up. Speaking of the truth, viewers know that Colin feels very passionately about the truth, but also about zodiac signs and about you also identify as Catholic. To
Uh-huh.
the outside viewer, these are three different competing sides. How do you balance this, and what would you say to that outside viewer?
Hmm. I hadn't considered them as three opposing sides. I might be considered them as like two. But I think actually it might be like the zodiac stuff, the psychology, the more occult kind of stuff over here, the Catholic stuff over here, and then the truth is somewhere like in the middle. So I don't know. I think, well, so I believe that like all belief systems in the world, there's some level of truth to it, or else it wouldn't necessarily like catch on. Like I think for something to spread or like gain a foothold in the culture, there's something there that is teaching people about the universe or their relationship to it or just human nature. And so, like, whenever I come across a system of beliefs or like a model of the universe, which is what I think astrology is, and also what organized religion is, I kind of like to analyze them and take from each of them like what I think is the at the heart, the core message or the value to them. So maybe that's kind of the core tenet that I'm really identified with, is trying to find the truth in any belief system and see why it's compelling to people. Um, and I don't know, as long as I'm sort of like positioned that way relative to any belief system, I think I can hold a lot of conflicting or seemingly conflicting ideas at the same time.
I like that. I knew you were gonna say something that has to do with like triangle or something like that. I literally saw that as I was writing these questions. I really like every time that you talk about zodiac signs or anything for viewers' sake. I always am texting Colin about things like, oh, the moon is like this. What should I think about it? Um, Flipping that onto maybe the more political side of things, you identify as a libertarian.
Mhm.
Why?
Very similar reason, very similar explanation, I would say. I do think that partisan politics has gotten way out of control. George Washington in his farewell speech really warned against like we shouldn't get entrenched in these partisan politics with a two-party system where it's just going to be a pendulum that swings back and forth every 4 years. There's not a lot of stability in that system, and a lot of bad actors are benefiting from the game of it. Like I fully see the parties as kind of two sides of the same coin. Both of them are establishment, very entrenched within Washington, D.C. They have all these resources to back the candidates who are kind of hand selected by the party leaders. Libertarianism as a philosophy, it's first and foremost a philosophy, not a party. And so I like that about it a lot because it has this long tradition going back to like, I don't know, England, Scotland, John Locke, Hume, like all these different philosophers who've been thinking about this even before the United States. A lot of our founding fathers based their, design of the United States on these philosophies. And so that's why I like libertarianism. But as a party, I think it also has great potential. Um, the established parties are kind of set in their ways. They have their operatives, they have their loyalists. But I like that a third party could emerge that would be brand new and could kind of start from scratch and be something very grassroots and very new. Because I think we need that right now.
Totally. Obviously, nothing is perfect. What do you think is the worst part of the Libertarian Party?
Whew, that's an interesting one. Well, I see there's a conflict emerging about, so liberty can be sometimes kind of a vague term because it kind of means something different to everyone. The definition that I like of liberty is that people are free to exercise their rights as long as it's not infringing on the rights of others or causing them, harm. There's different like strands within libertarianism, and I think that can be a strength and a weakness. It can be a weakness because there are divisions in the party, in the philosophy. Um, Right now, one of the divisions that I'm really trying to grapple with is some people are very pro, technology, and they want to push that as far as it can possibly go, even like combining biology with technology and creating kind of like cyborg people. You see this with like people wanting to put chips in people's brains, or just even using like different technology, which can be really great because it can, bring people's sight back or like heal traumatic brain injuries and
Hmm.
do these great things. But I do think there's got to be a limit to at some point, like our humanity can't be lost or fully merged. I don't think with technology, you can call it like transhumanism or something like this, where we're going to transcend our biology completely. That kind of makes me nervous, and I would argue is not very pro-liberty, although some people would say that that's sort of like the pinnacle of libertarianism, or like pushing that to its extreme would be like complete merging of human and tech. But I'm not sure about that.
And I think that we and the viewers have discussed, like AI and technology and how that's affecting us as writers. And we are
Yeah.
going to transition into talking about our time at the Vista.
Okay.
So, my first impression of you was that you were very businessy and serious. And the more I've gotten to know you, I've got to know that you're a very witty, passionate, and funny person, as well as your empathy. Like, I think you're very empathetic to a lot of different scenarios and people. How do you balance the perceived version of yourself versus the person that you identify with?
Man, there's a lot there. Okay. I think I'm gonna take it with the professional thing. I think I always like try to start very professional with people because you can always kind of lean into more personal. But if you start off super personal, it's hard to like wind it back and be more professional. So I definitely agree with you. Even when I was like in college, that doesn't surprise me that I probably came across that way. To the same effect, I would say like reserved. I think people perceive me to be very quiet, which is hilarious because now we have this podcast where I'm
Yeah.
like, talking back and forth with you for a whole hour and posting. And so, like, it's funny to me. There's always been very conflicting perceptions of me. I would say it doesn't necessarily bother me because I feel like I can inhabit two different, sort of like how I like to look at belief systems and break them down and take it for what it's worth, but leave the rest. I kind of feel the same way when I hear about different perceptions of me because it's all just like data and information, but I know that there's sort of like a core truth to it that like probably only I have true full access to because like I'm the only one who's spent every waking minute of my life with myself. So like I guess I use all that information of competing perceptions as data and information, and it makes sense to me when I hear like people think XYZ about me. I can usually grapple with it, process it, accept it, but at the end of the day, it's just one data point.
Right. And that was just my first impression of you, like I said. But I did notice when we did work in the Vista together that you had a difference between your personality working your junior year versus your senior year. And I would like to ask you, do you recommend working with your friends? Why or why not?
Um, I okay, so I loved both years. Junior and senior year were my favorite at the Vista for sure. Junior year, I was the copy editor, and it was a little bit more lax because my role was just to read over everyone else's copy and make sure there weren't any like typos, mistakes, and I would also, like introduce my edits. But senior year, I was the editor in chief, and that was a lot of responsibility because I was managing like the operation side of things and also the staff side of things and the content and copy editing. So it was like quite a bit extra responsibility. Um, so I would say I was working with friends both years, but it might not have seemed as friendly my senior year because I was so like stretched thin. But nonetheless, like I felt like I had very meaningful connections with people each year. Junior year was just a little bit more fun because some of that responsibility was on one of our other friends. And she was kind of the one who was oftentimes, trying to figure out stuff on the fly and trying to make everything work. So working with your friends, totally recommend it. Um, it does maybe complicate things slightly, although I never felt necessarily a conflict, but I had more fun junior year when I was a little bit less stressed, just slightly.
Well, I'm glad you say that because we are, in fact, friends who still work
Yeah,
together.
exactly.
Sometimes I joke to people that Colin is my colleague turned friend. And I think that that is a great answer to what I just asked. Speaking of, friendships and the Vista and USD and going back to USD in general, do you have like a best favorite time at USD? And I guess the foil of that is do you have a worst time?
Whew. Definitely have a worse time. I mean, the COVID period was
Yeah.
very strange. I'll save that whole story for another time, another episode or something, but COVID time was just weird. We were the only class that was living on campus at the time. So we didn't really have much guidance from like the upperclassmen, and I think that was to our detriment because a lot of the norms just flew out the window. People were kind of behaving badly, I would say, myself included. And it was just like it's the best of times, it was the worst of times. Honestly, that's my answer. That period of time, like Charles Dickens said, I think it was that like anything would go during that period. And so it was like the highest of highs, the lowest of lows. But I think the lack of like kind of examples that we had of what a normal college experience should be like was not amazing. And there was some downstream effects, which I know we do want to talk about at some point on this show of how COVID really impacted like our generation with the like developmental stages and how it hit us at a very, very strange developmental stage, I think.
Yeah, I love that for the viewers who don't know, Colin has a background in psychology, and I have loved dissecting the COVID times with you, as well as maybe our analyses on different people. If you had to analyze your community before USD, what would you say that that was like growing up, say with your friends and family on the East Coast versus living in San Diego and now back in DC?
Okay, if I like that question a lot, but I'm gonna backtrack just to say that I actually think the best time in college was the very end because we wrapped it up very
Yeah,
nicely,
we
and so
did.
I really enjoyed senior year at the end. But that's a great question. With the communities, so East Coast is very driven, very like go go go. You have Washington, New York, and so all of like the big um, like it's especially you see this with journalism, like the big outlets are on the East Coast. We're 3 hours ahead of the West Coast, and you may or may not like. I think that makes a big difference because I always felt like when I woke up in the morning on the West Coast, I was already 3 hours behind, and it was hard to communicate with people from the East Coast when there's always time differences, and you're trying to
Mhm.
set up like good time to call for both people. It was just like not everything just felt like a little bit more difficult on the West Coast versus the East Coast. Like people are so quick to like communicate and go after things and like it's very get up and go. So I like that personally about the East Coast a bit more, and that's kind of why I came back here when I was like starting professional life because I really wanted to work in an environment where I'd feel that kind of pressure and that like ambition and eagerness. Um, I honestly think the laxness of the West Coast is sometimes to its own detriment
Hmm.
because people become a bit complacent where like life there's like a certain quality of life which is great. I love how beautiful California is. I love the nature, the hikes, the beach, the weather, like it's great. But I do think when your life, your outward surroundings are so like beautiful and quote unquote perfect, it's like you're not very motivated to make changes. You're not very motivated to like go after it.
I think I've noticed that in this is my first time living on the East Coast. For you, you are a self-identified perfectionist. Um, how do you decide when something is done? And do you think there is such a thing as perfect work?
Definitely not such a thing as perfect work. Um, I mean, some of the best advice that I ever got about like in the newspaper business was that no newspaper is a perfect copy. Like, we could do our very, very best, but it's just impossible to cover all of your bases all the time, no matter how hard you try. So I've definitely had to like come to grips with that. The newspaper was a great coming to grips with that because you just have to like
Right.
trust everyone around you that, everything that they're telling you about their methods and sources and all this is sound and trust but verify, I would have to say. But as far as knowing when something is done, it depends. In my like creative work, it's a very personal knowing. It feels very internal. I'd say it is like a feeling. It's like a feeling of kind of culmination, completion, resolution. I think if I don't feel like an internal sense of resolution or like I worked as hard as I can on this, then I won't feel like something is done. But I do think I operate well under deadline too as well. That has helped me a lot. Like working under deadline, for instance, at the newspaper, really forced me to contend with like, yes, I need to feel a certain level of completion for me to call it complete, but you have to also operate within like the real world, which has a lot of external demands, and finding some like middle ground between those two things where you can feel internally done and the world is telling you like, oh, you're done.
Speaking of creative writing, like you mentioned, I know that you're writing a book.
hmm
What is the main motivation behind that?
Going back to your very first question, I have to say the truth. Um, the book that I've written, it's pretty much done now. I'm sharing drafts of it with various different people who are kind of reading the early, it's not an early draft, but they're reading and helping me finish it. And I would say that it covers a lot of truth that I don't think has been said um, about patterns in society that bother me a lot, but haven't really been addressed. So I know I'm being like pretty vague here. Definitely like personal truths that I hold, but haven't spoken on, get spoken on in the story for sure. It's very personal in that way. And fiction is a great like outlet to explore some of that. Um, I think that fiction is a great distillation of the truth because it's not necessarily claiming like this is the exact precise truth in the same way that like a journalistic report is, but it's sort of like a meta truth. I've heard like Jordan Peterson, who's a psychologist I like, explain it where fiction is almost like good written literature, fiction is almost realer than real
Hmm.
because it's a condensing of truth down to its most like communicable, understandable form. So that's what I've really found with writing as well, is like I can kind of take all these different observations I've had throughout my own personal life, distill them down into something that feels now at this point, it feels almost like realer to me than real possible events that it may or may not be based on.
I really like that. I think I totally agree with when authors and when writers get into their work, it's almost hard to separate the truth from fiction because at that point you're writing it so much that it becomes real to you. You were saying that you were sharing it with people close to you. Who do you think in your personal life that pre-college, are there people in your personal life that you feel are pillars of you in that maybe shaped the person that you are?
De I mean, definitely. Totally. And I would say all of them, there are characters in the book who may or may not bear some resemblance to these real people in my life who have shaped me so much. I have a twin sister, so that was extremely that transformed me as a person from birth because like you literally are sharing everything that you have from that early age, including like your parents' resources and attention. And um, my sister and I, you experience life from a very similar perspective, but then at the same time, like she has such a different, unique perspective from mine. And so that has really been an interesting thing to analyze of like how are we born and raised at the exact same time, witnessed most of the exact same stuff, and yet walked away with still different understandings and perceptions of the world. And so I value our conversations with my sister quite a bit for that
Hmm.
reason, because we both can come to better understandings of like what informed our uniqueness, I guess. Um, I have an older sister as well, and kind of same deal. And we grew up moving around a lot, so that shaped our family quite a bit. But each of the members of my family are equally shaping of me in that way. Yeah, moving around, it was hard to have like close friends when I was really young, but we lived in Maryland for middle school and high school when I was that age. So I've really good friends from that period, and several of them I'm still pretty close with today. So they're all more or less characters in that story if you read that.
I love that we've brought up so much of the way that you were raised and how we can get to know you through the people around you. Ideally, though, where in the perfect world do you see yourself in 6 months?
Oh God,
In
six
your dream,
months.
imagine there's no money involved or anything like that. Where are you in 6 months in your AI
Um,
reality?
I would like to have a literary agent. That's kind of my main priority right now because I am trying to market and sell this manuscript that I've written. And so that's a huge first step to getting actually published by like a traditional publishing house. So I've been looking into this process for quite a while, and I'm pretty ready to start, sending stuff out. And if that takes off, I really don't know where that would lead. It could go many different, many different ways. I like where I'm living right now. I really like Washed Up, and I honestly have so much fun. Like, it's very needed. I think like
Hmm.
having like a weekly touch base about like what's going on in the news this week is also very like good for me because I would be following the news regardless and probably just like stewing on it or like texting with you about it.
Yeah.
And so the fact that we can do it like publicly and also have other people potentially weigh in on our conversations and maybe even build like a community around it. I would love to see that. I think that's the long-term vision with Washed Up is like build to the point where we have a community who are all kind of seeing the world similarly and able to have like very nuanced conversations about current events. And I mean, I would love to have a book club for Washed Up. I
Oh
think that
yeah.
would be fun. I know like I kind of am borrowing that from Candace Owens, but I don't know. I'm not in her book club, but I know she has one.
Thanks for the clarification.
And so like I would love to be the ones deciding like what books is our community of subscribers going to read this month and then have conversations with them about it. Um, maybe if my book actually gets published, we can have a book club for that. So that would be really fun. I'd like to travel a bit more, have another trip coming up in August. So if all that happens in 6 months, I will be very content.
Hopefully in 6 months from now, we're watching this back reacting. Anyways, that was my last question. We're like out of time now.
Nice.
But yay, that was Colin's
This was
interview.
fun.
And I guess we could film like a little outro right now too. Anyways, those were our interviews. Colin interviewing me and me interviewing you. Do you have any like reflections on that experience? I feel like we've never done anything like this with each other.
It was good. I mean, I feel like we had a lot of like commonalities and overlap, and that doesn't surprise me. Definitely, I like how the Vista featured very prominently in both of our interviews of each other, which makes sense because obviously that's like what introduced us at first, but also just like what a transformative couple of years that was working at that paper, I think shows in our conversation.
Me too.
So we owe everyone there a lot of gratitude, and I think like in line with what we started this show for, encourage people to get involved in student journalism too, because it could take you some interesting places.
I would love for everyone to be involved in an organization like that. I think that specifically ours, we always use the word scrappy and hungry. I think that any org where there's this level of like I don't want to say unprofessionalism because that has like a negative connotation, but this like project build-esque type feeling, I think many can benefit from that because you learn a lot about adaptability, one another, and just make great
I
friends.
feel like the Vista, we had kind of like startup energy
Yes.
because we were always, the staff would only stick around for a couple of years while they're in college. So we had like, a high amount of people coming and going at all times, which was great because we could kind of rebuild from scratch every single year, really. We had a new staff. So that was brought the startup culture and also allowed us at the same time to like make really lasting, close friendships with each other over all of the hard work that we had to do.
It's like a trauma bond.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit. Okay, then that is done. Wash
Watch
Pip
that
out.
out.